Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. You know, in Mississippi, I always like to say the air is just a little bit cleaner and the grass is just a little bit greener. You know, Mississippi has some of the best beaches in the world. You know, the climate is good all year round. You know, you can fish and play golf all year round. We have less than 3 million people in the entire state. There's 6 million people in Chicago. And so we don't have all of the people. We have beautiful land, beautiful weather. It's the land of opportunity. But it sits currently on the bottom. And when you're on the bottom, there's only one way you can go, and that's upward. Now, Mississippi has to realize its condition. It has enjoyed that position of being last for the last 50 years or more. And so we know now that we're going to have to do something different if we ever want to change the position that we're currently in. By changing the position, we have to increase the quality of life, improve the quality of life for all Mississippians, not just the white Mississippians or the Asian or the Hispanic Mississippians, but all Mississippians. African Americans make up greater than 40% of this great state. And yet we get less than 2% for contracts of goods and services out of the state of Mississippi. The 2nd Congressional District looks like a third world country. There's been disinvestment in Mississippi for decades and decades and decades, even though we had 2 of the strongest senators in the history, Stennis and Eastland. You would have thought that they would have been able to do more for Mississippi than what we got done. But they didn't want to do more. They did not want to do anything that benefited the minority population, the African American populations in this great state. They invested in certain areas, and that's why you have a Air Force base down in Meridian, Mississippi. And that's why over in Columbus, Mississippi, you have an Air Force base. But in the African-American diaspora, what do we have? We have casinos. We got a casino in the 2nd Congressional District. We got a casino in Vicksburg. We got a casino in Natchez, Mississippi. All in predominantly black areas. And this is by design, and this is by plan. Nothing in this country happens unless it happens through policy and planning. And Europeans are notorious for having 20 and 25-year plans. African Americans have the inability to plan. It's just like the storm that came through Katrina when it came through New Orleans. There was no time to plan for an escape route for African Americans in the 9th Ward. They couldn't get out. They couldn't get out because their car wouldn't start and there was no gas. And so we saw people standing on rooftops and on buses, and it was just a time of great despair. And so that's what we have here in Mississippi. We have a time of great despair. African Americans have to do better. We were part of the great improvements in Mississippi when Mississippi was king, when cotton was king. It was on the backs of African Americans that this state enjoyed its great heyday that led us into the Civil War. Now, many of us don't even know why the Civil War was fought. I'm going to ask my co-host, a renowned orator and educator, a man that was born on a plantation in the 2nd Congressional District up in the Mississippi Delta, who escaped the plantation, ran away. You know, back at the time when most people tried to run away, they were captured, brought back. And we were reminded of the movie with Toby, Kunta Kinte, named this child Kissy, which means you stay put. But this gentleman that I'm about to bring on today is escaped. And he knows a lot about why Mississippi and others in the South fought that great war, where over 700,000 people gave their lives. And we need to understand what that was all about and how serious is this game that's being played to keep blacks in a position of last in everything that matters. Dr. Henderson, it's always good to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Mr. Socrates. Thank you.
Tell our viewers a little bit about your background, etc., and then I'd like for you to explain to us why did we fight the Civil War.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen worldwide, I want to tell you my name is Eldridge Henderson. I'm from Mississippi, the great state of Mississippi. I was born in the Delta, the hard-working region where they had a lot of cotton fields and so forth. In a week's time, I moved to Hinds County, Mississippi, and grew up there, lived on a plantation in Hinds County for 17 years. I tell this story often. I didn't know that I was a slave at the time because we had 4 things that were guaranteed. We all had a job from age 4 until 18. When you turn 18 or 16, it all depends on the education level. You were given a house if you wanted to remain on the plantation. That's number 1, job. Number 2, we had shelter, had a regular house to live in. We had food, had the company store, go and get all the food you want. And the good part about it, we had security on the workplace, because every time you had a mishap with your farm equipment, including animals, you can go and get it replaced the same day or no later than the next day. And that guaranteed food, clothing, shelter, and a good job. I thought there wasn't nothing wrong with it until I turned 18. And I looked at my past, 17 years. I looked at my relatives, ladies and gentlemen, that had been on the plantation for at least 3 generations, during slavery and after slavery. And I decided that I would just move to Jackson, Mississippi, and see if I can hustle, go to school, join the military, do something to get out of that situation. And I did do those 3 things. Moved to Jackson, eventually included myself for a few years in education pursuits. During that period, I did join the military. But matter of fact, the plantation got me in the military. I was drafted. And of course, they gave me another permanent job, and that was to fight for non-democracy in Vietnam. And that's when I really realized that there's no need to be a slave if you know how to fight. That's my story, Mr. Socrates.
Well, I want you to talk a little bit about the Civil War. Why was it fought in the first place? And, you know, exactly what was the outcome of that?
Well, the story is very simple. I don't care what you read, ladies and gentlemen. The Civil War was fought to keep folks in slavery like me. Black folks, poor folks, especially black males and females, their children, and the poorest stock are white folks in those areas. Many of those white people lived on the same plantation we lived on, and they were just as poor as we were. But one thing, though, we never worked together, and that was the history. So the war was fought to maintain slavery. It didn't happen. They lost, the Southerners lost for just a few years, and they had something, Mr. Socrates, called Reconstruction. And they renewed, revamped the activity of the war, and the federal government had some problems and conflicts in getting a new president, and they made a deal, and the Southerners decided that we'll support the president if he would get the federal soldiers out of the South so we can get the Negroes and black and poor folks back into slavery on these plantations. And that's what they call quasi-slavery. And since that day, on the same plantation I was on in the 1940s, that plantation is still there in Hinds County, and some of my relatives and other people I know are still there, living on that plantation. But now, though, they're doing well, they say. Many of them have no education. They still have a guaranteed job. They can take care of the animals, pick cotton with a cotton picker. They have fence building procedures. They have the automatic hole digger now. And they pay them a great fee, they say, of minimum wage, $6.35. And some of my folks and others wouldn't be moving if they were forced to move. They just enjoy that life because they have everything they want. The plantation store is still there, and they can go and get anything they want and put it on their book.
So we're talking about history. We're not only talking about Mississippi history, but we're talking about U.S. history. You see, over 700,000 people lost their lives in the Civil War. Now, what could be so important? What could be so important for you to give up 700,000 lives? What could it possibly be? Some of the great wars in our country, in the history of this great country and the world, have been wars about religion, faith. It's my understanding, Dr. Henderson, that the folk that came to America were running from oppression and looking for a better way of life. And so, you know, religion and the wars in religion have been prominent throughout our history. So the Civil War wasn't fought about religion. It was fought for economics. And many people don't understand that there are two things in this world that will cause countries to go to war. And I've just mentioned both of those. War for religious preferences and economics. So following that trend of thought, Doc, and we gotta follow this trend of thought because we are going to have wars in the future. And I know you're not a prophet, but you are an ordained minister. And you've studied a lot, both in American history and world history and biblical history. We will have more wars.
We will, I guarantee you.
And Doc, it's probably going to be about those two things.
There's nothing else to fight a war for. It has to be economics and what I call religion or some kind of doctrine. Now, the Civil War had another component that people don't like to talk about. They had a religious factor there, too. I call it white supremacy. That is a religion. And that is to maintain the white male as the dominant force in his region, which was the South and the United States at that time. And the good part about it, that's according to the historians, the Northerners were not too concerned either about the plight of black folks, but they fought the war for other reasons. Many of them were drafted into the war against their will. Many of the Southerners were forced to join the military after a while. But in the South, sir, the rich boys didn't have to go. All they had to do is go and hire 2 or 3 of their poor white friends or associates to go, and they went to the war, the Civil War, on their behalf.
Is there a difference between Southern whites and Northern whites in terms of, we really don't understand why Northerners were willing to fight in the Civil War? I mean, exactly what was going on there?
Well, the South...
Because I believe that the President Lincoln was a slave owner.
Well, he has been alleged to be a slave owner, slave sympathizer, and he looked upon black folks as inferior, that they were burdens of beasts. He had them hanging around his White House. They always worked with him. He had no respect for them. And he was just like others. He said, I'm fighting this war to keep the Union together. I care nothing about black folks, nothing about them. I would like to send a lot of them to Africa, get rid of them. That was too expensive. Had a lot of folks against that because the Southerners knew that they had so much power in the Constitution that when they had the war to end, which lasted about 5 years, they knew in a few years they would get their country back, the southern part of the United States, because they had the majority in the Senate. Those guys would stay in there until they died. So they had themselves as chairmen of most of the important committees, and they believed in caucusing and making deals. And in just a few years after the Civil War, the white Southerners negotiated with their northern friends that we're going to get the land back through reparations. You're going to pay us for our slaves that you took from us, and you're going to pay us for our plantations, and you're going to give most of them back to us. And that's exactly what happened. And then you're going to move your federal forces out of the South, and we're going to come back and take over and do just like we did for the last 400 years.
Are you implying that white Southerners got reparations for their loss during the Civil War?
Oh, most certainly did. The books will prove it to you, history books. But now they don't talk about that today. Even the current journalists don't talk about that very much. But you can find it if you read the history of the South in non-textbooks. You're not going to find that in the textbooks, because the little part about slavery in the South in the textbooks is very, very inviting. It sounds so good. I probably want to go back in slavery for a while. You were happy. You enjoyed smiling and skinning and grinning, and you didn't have nothing to worry about. You just enjoyed picking that cotton and working from sunup to sundown, because master was good for you.
He let you off on Saturday night.
That's right. And then you could go to church on Sunday, and initially you can listen to his preacher, the white preacher that he's trained. And black people got so excited, they wanted to preach. So he would get the white preacher to train the black preacher, and that gave the black man status in the community. Couldn't read or write, most of them, but they had good memory. Black folks.
Well, I recall in the church that the preacher would simply say, have a sister that stand up and read the Bible. He would say, read.
Well, some of them do that today. That's right.
Because he couldn't read.
Exactly. I had a preacher like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Reverend Thomas, by the way, when I was a boy.
I wonder, how did he become a preacher?
Well, the Lord called him.
Did the Lord call him, or did the white folk appoint him?
Well, I know the real reason. He was a good man in the church. He caused no trouble. His family for generations loved white people. And he was just such a good man. They appointed him. They gave the black folks some land to build a black church on. And they appointed him to be the overseer.
Now we're gonna have to go to a commercial break, but we're gonna come back and we're gonna continue to deal with and dive into the condition of the African American in America and throughout the world, and see exactly how much progress has been made, during your lifetime, So we want to deal with that when we come back after this commercial break. We're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi at the We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. We've been seen all over the world, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Roku TV, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. We need you to support this program. If you're watching us on Facebook, we ask you to go ahead and send some stars to us so that you can help finance the mission and the message. It's critically important you do that. Share this program with your friends and family and send stars. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to this program on YouTube. If you're watching us on our own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, hit the donate button. Send us some assistance. Help us do this. I remember when Lawrence Jones went on This Is Your Life, and he asked America to send him just $1. Just send him $1, and he could build a school. And look what he was able to accomplish. We're asking you out there today that if you're watching this program, consider donating $1 per month to this cause on our website to help us build this studio out, help us bring people like Dr. Eldridge Henderson here that's going to bring you information that you can't find anywhere else. As he said, it's not written in the history books, but it's being told here at this broadcast station. We're going to a break, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
Good evening, and welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South, where African Americans represent greater than 40% of the population in this state. And we do believe that one day the South shall rise again. But this time, it must be different. This time, it's akin to the rabbit having a gun. This time, African Americans must be in key positions. We hold no major offices in our state government. We hold no major offices at all on the department heads. Less than 12% of the department heads are African American in a state where we're 40% of the population. African American businesses get less than 2% of contracts for goods and services from the state of Mississippi. We don't do much better in the areas where blacks are in control. One senator from Mississippi reported that blacks are out white folk in the white folk these days. They're keeping the purse and they're keeping the dollars flowing to the white community better than the white folks were doing it themselves. And they are in a position now to make a difference. And instead of us gaining ground, we're losing ground every day. And it's not just happening here in Jackson, Mississippi. It's happening all over this country. It's happening all over the world. You know, if you go into Africa, go into Sierra Leone, see what the Chinese are doing there versus what African Americans are doing. You know, it's happening all over the world. Black folk may have been the first human beings on the face of the earth and may have been the father of civilization on the banks of the Nile. But we're in a current position of decline that's threatening our very existence. My guest, Dr. Henderson, has reported on many shows that blacks are now in position number 9 as it relates to influence, economics, and the ability to educate your children. I'm going to ask Dr. Henderson to share with our viewers all over the world exactly how he sees the condition of black folks after the Civil War and after all of the things that we talked about in the first half of this show. We want to know a little bit more about where we are today. Doc, how do you see African Americans in Mississippi, in the South, and in the world? How are we progressing?
To be brief, and this is going to be surprising to some, ladies and gentlemen, black people in America are in worse situation than they were after slavery. We only had 6 years, Mr. Socrates, of civil freedom in America. And that was during the Reconstruction period from 1868 to 1874. And after that time, white people in the South, with the support of the North, gradually phased out black folks. If you look at the history books, we had black folks in the state legislatures, senators, black sheriffs in the South, black superintendents, black principals, black police officers. Only during that time, they had civil rights legislation for housing, transportation, schools, and gradually they, what I call, wiped the slate clean. But the bad part about it, most of these black representatives we had, and most people still don't like to talk about it, but most of them were mulattoes or outsiders. And most people that I know today don't want to admit that. And all I do is tell people, look at the pictures of these black legislators that we had in the South during that time. Look at their physical composition. Look at the black senators we had from Mississippi. We had 2 black senators, Lynch and Harrow. Look at their pictures. Look at the young men that were in the legislature, North and South Carolina, and tell me were they black folks or not. I've seen them for years, their pictures, and only 5 or 6 of them look like they were real Africans. Look at them for yourself. So we have always been maneuvered. Our leaders have been selected by the special interest groups and people that are interested in their own affairs. And many of our legislators agreed with what was going on during that period, even though a few would say, I'm going to support you right now, give us a little more freedom. And one from Mississippi said, I'm going to support you if you give me a little opportunity and some land so I can move and have myself and my people away from you. And they created a little community called Mount Bayou. They had 1,000 acres of land, about 8,000. Now they have less than 1,000. And this guy moved to that area, thought he was going to have some independence, and it didn't happen, ladies and gentlemen.
Doc, Mount Bayou is one of those historic towns in Mississippi. Most African Americans in this country come from Mississippi. If you go to Chicago, everybody you find there.
California, that's right.
They have roots in Mississippi and in the South. And so this is where we emanate from. Wherever you might be today, if you're in Seattle, Washington, you have family in the South and more than likely in Mississippi. And so we have blacks that have gone on to do some outstanding things in other parts of the country. Like we have the mayor of Los Angeles, Tom Bradley was the mayor there back in 1971, 72. We have African-American mayors, some of the most famous one up in Washington, D.C., who was from Mount Bayou, I believe he was.
Yeah, that young man that had a little problem with drugs.
Well, I don't know if he had problems with drugs or not, or whether he was given a problem.
I got you.
You see, there are so many black folk that have been imprisoned falsely
And framed.
and framed.
Set up. Exactly.
So Marion Barry was a triumphant person in the black community. He got reelected as the mayor of D.C., Washington, D.C., even after he had gone to prison.
That's correct.
And came back and got elected again because black folk needed someone that was courageous enough to stand up. He was for the people. Now, and then demonstrate that. Now, Doc, back in the days when you were coming up, did you have black leaders that stood up in Mississippi? Do you have anybody that you looked up to?
Yeah, I did. I looked up to several. Aaron Henry. Aaron Henry. He was a druggist in the Delta. He ended up in the legislature. There was the Evers brothers, especially Charles Evers and Medgar Evers. But first it was Medgar, because he was over there on Lynch Street in Jackson when I attended Jackson State University during those early years. And I worked with the NAACP as a student leader on campus. They gave me the job as vice president of the student NAACP on campus because the other students didn't want it. The students that were interested in NAACP wanted to be the president of it. And I just wanted to be a member. Somebody nominated me, and I won by accident. And I said, well, this might not be a bad deal.
Yeah, but were you any good? Did you do anything with the position?
No, I didn't, because they fired me. A few months later, after I got that wonderful job, no pay involved, but it was status to me. Being from the plantation, man, being the vice president of a student NAACP on a college campus, man, I thought that was important. But I didn't know nothing about that kind of stuff. But the bad part, a few months later, Martin Luther King and some of his boys were talking about a big demonstration down in Jackson. And they sent Jesse Jackson and some other boys and a few females to teach us how to take abuse from the police and water hose and dogs and stuff. And I told them, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. You're gonna let these people kill you. They taught us how to fall up in a knot and brace ourselves and just take those beatings. And when I didn't support that, they took my position and broke my heart, sir. I lost my first non-paid important position in my mind because I didn't want to be a coward and an Uncle Tom.
Well, I don't know if it was a coward and an Uncle Tom. If you're taking a beating in a demonstration about the condition of your folk, I don't see that as a cowardly act. I think that's probably one of the bravest acts that I can ever imagine. Knowing that you're going to get beat down, water hoses and dogs put on you.
And horses running over you.
And horses running over you.
That's
and
right.
yet you go. That's a courageous person.
But that's what they told me. Told me I was a coward, said I was scared, and I need to go and fight for my rights. And then after that period, I ended up in Vietnam, damn it, under the same situation. And when I left Mississippi in the 1970s to go to the military, and I get tired of talking about it, I couldn't even vote. A month or two before I had a chance to get in that military situation, we went to the Masonic Temple there behind the college there on Lynch Street, and we had to register, and they put all the applications in a box, and the Secret Service or somebody, federal marshals or somebody, took it to the courthouse. Because we couldn't go because folks didn't want to be killed or beat to death. So when I was over there in that war fighting, I was a non-citizen, as I call it, couldn't vote. And I am like some say over there fighting for democracy. Still in a segregated situation. And then when they killed Martin Luther King, I was in Vietnam during that period in 1968. And they segregated us again in Vietnam while we were fighting the enemy. Because we were fighting among ourselves, and you don't hear people talking about it very much. But after a few months, they reintegrated the barracks, and we went on and lost the war.
Well,
in 1972, it was over basically. We lost that war, Doc.
I don't know if we lost it or not, Doc.
Oh, really?
I also was in the war during the Vietnam area.
But you said during the era.
Yeah.
But were you in Vietnam?
No, that's why I said during the Vietnam
See what
era.
I'm talking about? Right.
That's right. I got drafted to go to the Army after graduating from college.
Right, see?
So I already had.
I went before
finance.
I graduated from college.
Right, and that's why you went to infantry.
That's right.
And I escaped and went into finance.
See?
But Doc, you know, wonderful history, things that you and I sit and talk about and reminisce about that has impacted and affected this entire country. You know, Martin Luther King's murder and assassination affected the whole world.
Exactly.
You know, there are other things that have done that. You know, the brutal beating and murder of Emmett Till was one of those things that shattered America. George Floyd killing and the knee on his neck, it just really devastated America. And we could go on and name all of those things that we have seen in our lifetime. And we've seen some courageous things that occurred. We never thought we would see a black president. You know, we thought that Bill Clinton was the first black president. But we later learned that he wasn't. And so we've seen a lot of things. But Doc, have we progressed? Have we changed? Are we better off today than we were when you were slipping off to go to that honky-tonk up in the Mississippi Delta?
We're worse off today than we were during that period.
Wow.
Now, during that period, when I was in my teens, you had a few black banks in Jackson. We had 4 movie theaters, had 4 or 5 black hotels in Jackson, had a credit union, clinics, 2 or 3 clinics, and we were able to go to the dentist, photography shops, and other places where black folks could work and buy things you need, and black people owned those places. Now you can't find not one black hotel in Jackson, not one movie theater in Jackson that's black or white. I'm talking about the city of Jackson, Mississippi. Not one black hospital. All of them are closed, but they do have a few black clinics. That was during the time of segregation. Black folks at that period, as you know, had to have their own economic means because they could not go to the white hospital. If I had to go to a white hospital, I would probably be taken in the basement during that period or put in the hallway. If I had a black doctor, which I didn't have because we didn't need doctors during that time. We had doctors in the community, Mother, Dad, Uncle John, and Mary Jane. Your black doctor couldn't come and see you. They couldn't even come to the hospital and practice with you. If you got hurt in an accident, you most certainly didn't have to worry about going to the hospital because you usually got killed. Because if a white and blacks had an accident on the road, the ambulance would take the white person to the hospital and leave a black there because the sheriff had to call a black funeral home to get the black person to the doctor or the hospital somewhere. And imagine you're in a wreck somewhere, about to die, bleeding to death, and you're down in a hospital in the basement or in the hallway, and here's a strange doctor going to take care of all the white folks first, and then come, what's wrong with you, boy? Now, I hate to say it, but I remember those kind of things, sir.
Doc, I know you
and
do.
I'm still alive.
And you are surviving, but you probably don't know it, but you are having some effects from all of the things that you've seen. And you've been traumatized.
I guarantee it's PTSD, man.
That's probably why
traumatic stress.
That's probably why you act the way you do.
Probably
sometimes.
so. I guarantee that's it.
Listen, we've been broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. You know, we have a lot of fun. We talk about these things. It's critically important. You know, Mississippi has banned the teaching of critical race theory in its state, even though it wasn't being taught in the first place. The governor and the band of bandits up in the legislature decided that they would put a law in place that says that the critical race theory would not be taught in Mississippi schools. And Doc, you say you don't blame them.
No, I don't blame them.
We're coming to the end of our program, but why don't you blame
Well, if they would teach critical race theory as it actually happened in Mississippi, the South, and America, the white students, white young people will have a revolution because they will find all the things that their grandparents, their current parents, their uncles and cousins and others did in the 1800s, the 1900s, and up to today that denied the black folks, Hispanics, and American Indians in our state the right to be a real human being.
And they don't want that.
I wouldn't want that either if I were a white person. I want my kids to know nothing about critical race theory because they will see that we were savages.
Well, we've come to the end of the program. We're going to continue to bring these kind of programs and these messages to our viewers all over the world. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, send stars and share this program with your friends and families. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching us on WeBelieveDigital.com, then we want you to hit that donate button. We need your help to continue bringing programs like this. Until next week, good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again.